Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have lawyer, and aspiring politician, I guess I would say, Jason Cherniak, been a friend of mine for quite a while, and we're going to have a discussion about politics. And I think it's going to be unique in the sense that you're going to see two people that maybe disagree on a couple things, maybe agree on other things, but have a lot of respect for each other. And I think that might be refreshing to the listener who is used to something different when it comes to political opinions. And so, but if you're listening to this and you like podcasts, maybe you're mowing your lawn, maybe you're driving along. A lot of podcast listeners have always thought about starting a podcast. And I don't blame you because I have 5. And I love it. I love doing it. But you know what's a real pain in the butt? The biggest pain in the butt is producing and recording podcasts. Yeah, I got news for you. You can't download an app onto your BlackBerry or onto your iPhone or whatever, and the next day you have the Joe Rogan experience. It does not work like that. It's better to have someone who does the production, finds you guests, takes care of all the nonsense, RSS feeds and all that sort of stuff involved with podcasting. And all you got to do is prepare for recording, which is the creative part and the fun part. So go to getagripstudios.com and talk to my producer, Scotty, if you want to do a podcast. Getagripstudios.com. Jason Cherniak, it's been too long, buddy. We've been trying to do this. I've asked you a couple times. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun, man. And so, you know what's interesting is, how long have I known you? 14 years, 12 years, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Right when I started my law firm, I think I met you.
Yeah, it's going back. We were a lot younger. I think I was in my 20s, actually, when I met you. And now I'm 40. I'm going to be 43 next month. So it's been a while. And you and I have always kind of talked a little bit of politics, and we've shared our opinions. And, I don't think we've always agreed. But what we did agree on is that the other person had Canada's or Ontario's or Toronto's best interests at heart. And I think we're not seeing that in politics right now, Jason. We're seeing a lot of dialogue where, and it's increasing in the sense that if someone disagrees with you, they have to be a scumbag or they have to be a person of low character or what have you. How have you over the years dealt with that? Because I don't like that presumption to start things off with in a conversation.
So I grew up in a family where we would often argue about politics and disagree. And I guess I've always approached it as people have opinions and they've thought them through. And I might disagree, but that doesn't mean that I'm right and it doesn't mean that they're wrong. And someone can be very wrong and they can hold opinions that I think are even insulting. But often it's not because they're bad people and they're trying to insult people or say bad things. It's because they just aren't aware of other perspectives. And I've always taken the view that explaining myself hopefully will at least give them an understanding of that different perspective and help them to at least consider alternatives or change the way that they explain what they think. And it's just the way that I see the world. I think most people are good people. Very few people believe that they're a bad person and are trying to be a bad person. And the only way you're ever going to convince anyone is to listen to what they say, take them at face value, and respond.
The art of persuasion, I think, has been lost in my lifetime. I remember, in high school, listening to Brian Mulroney or to Jean Chrétien and listening to what they were saying for a long period of time, watching full debates with my parents on TV between politicians. I remember, Paul Martin and I remember Jean Chrétien. I remember thinking, what a sly move, the Reform Alliance. Remember that? He would call Harper the Reform Alliance, and he would, that kind of thing, and that, the build up, and there was respect there, though. They didn't go too far. They didn't, assassinate other people's characters, but they spoke to politics and they spoke to their positions. I don't see that at all today. Do you?
I wouldn't say I don't see it at all, but I don't see it coming from the leadership, and you don't see it on the news and in the media because the average voter doesn't pay enough attention to listen to that conversation or arguments or debate. And the average voter is not going to be persuaded by logic. What they're looking for is emotion. Most people vote, they make up, I don't think you can say most, but a large number of people make up their decision in the ballot box. And it ultimately is based on an emotional feeling of who they want to win or who they want to vote for. And politicians know that. So when the prime minister is making statements, he can be asked a very fair question in question period. And maybe he could answer it if he knew that the media wasn't going to only show a 5-second clip of his answer, because the media is going to pick out those 5 seconds that say what the media wanted to say, and they're not going to show the whole 30-second answer that gives the context. So it affects how the leadership of politics.
Well, maybe the answer is 5 minutes. I mean, never mind 30 seconds. I mean, some of these issues are very complex. I mean, it takes.
Well, sure. And my father-in-law was telling me that there are some studies that say the average attention span has gone down in the last 50 or 100 years. I mean, you look at the 1800s, politicians would give 3-hour speeches, and people would sit there and listen, and it was entertainment for them. Now, after 15 or 20 minutes, even at a political convention, everybody's had enough of it. So, but there is more to it than that also. There's Twitter. There's the fact that no matter how much a politician wants to give context, you only have your 48 characters or whatever, it's per 240 characters
Something
for your
like
tweet.
that, yeah.
And there's also the problem that I've run into trying to get elected, that this is a little bit self-serving, but I think there are some people in politics that aren't that smart. And they don't get there because they're intelligent and they've thought through the problems. They get there because they have nothing else to do and they have time to knock on doors and sign up members of a political party. So you end up with what we have now, where, in the last election, Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer, I had a strong opinion on who I thought was better, but I'm not sure that either of them was the best Canada had to offer.
Well, I mean, you just have to look to U.S. politics, which is basically the same system, or was born out of the same system that we were, to see that that clearly if you put up Biden, some people, you have to want Trump to win. I mean, that's like ridiculous, actually. There were so many better candidates than that. I'm following the conservative leadership race right now pretty closely. And, it's interesting to watch that, how little Canadians pay attention to that. That's actually a major decision by our country, who is going to be the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. That's important, but doesn't get a lot of press attention. Let me ask you this. I've been watching your Twitter for a while, and it seems to me that you've been increasingly frustrated with the Prime Minister's office and their management of scandals, or volume of scandals, or what is it that you're frustrated? Because I've never seen you call out liberal politicians the way you have in the last 2-3 months. I've been following you on Twitter for a while.
So you'll see more of what I think on Facebook than you will on Twitter, because I prefer writing the longer, almost like opinion pieces. So a year ago, with the SNC Lavalin scandal, for example, I initially thought that it was overblown. And it was when Jane Philpott came out and said there was a problem that I started paying attention, because I know her personally and I have a lot of respect for her. And once I paid attention to it, what I saw was, I still think the Liberals could have explained what they were trying to do. And as a lawyer, my view is that the Attorney General should have resigned in October. She shouldn't have spent 2 months saying, what was the line they used? She had her finger in the dam and she was stopping the leak. That isn't what lawyers do. What lawyers are supposed to do is tell their clients, if you're doing something unethical, I resign. And then the client knows how serious it is. And the client, the Prime Minister, could have made a choice.
Yeah, but the client is the Prime Minister of Canada, Jason.
And her job was to say to him, if you insist on this, I'm not going to be your Attorney General anymore.
Yes,
and then he could have made an informed decision.
But what happened instead, in your opinion? What happened instead?
Instead, what happened is she tried to stick around, and because she thought she could resolve the problem just by being there. The leader's office, I think, overreacted and got more and more upset. They weren't listening, and at the same time, because there was not that final "you do it or else," they also didn't have a reason to think it was as urgent as she believed it was. So when everything finally hit and they heard the behind the scenes and they understood what was really going on and her view of it, immediately they should have said, I'm sorry, I didn't know that the Attorney General thought it was this important. We found her comments to be passive aggressive to the Prime Minister. Now that we understand, we realize we made a mistake. An apology at the outset would have been the right way to do it. Instead, what we saw, and we're seeing it with We, is every day there's new information that comes out. Every day there's a little bit more of a drip, drip, drip of something you didn't know before. And as long as that continues to happen, the scandal's going to continue to grow. And you look at this.
No, I think that's actually a strategy, a management strategy. I think it's a very smart management strategy, Jason. I disagree with you. I think it only pisses off really intelligent people. I think a lot of times when you muddy the waters and you point fingers and you mix other people into the situation, you lose clarity, you lose focus. People are like, oh, what is it again? Oh, I just love that Trudeau guy. He's so nice or whatever. Listen, he tried to prevent SNC Lavalin Group from going to trial for corruption. That's what he tried to do, no? His buddies in Montreal.
Well, so I don't know that I'd call them his buddies in Montreal. But yes, what he was trying...
I'm being facetious, of course, but yes.
No, I know, but I think it's important to make that distinction that on one hand, and I did forget about this because it was a while ago and I haven't put my mind to it, but
sure.
The thing that bothered me about it was that they were asking the Attorney General to interfere in a criminal prosecution. And it would be no different than Trudeau saying, you know that guy charged with murder? I don't think he's guilty. I want you to tell the prosecutor to drop the charges. It doesn't even have to be a friend, right? And it's the wrong thing to do. That's not a politician's job. So in that sense, what he was doing was wrong. And so that's where I go with SNC. As far as this drip, drip, drip thing, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think there are some people that get confused by it and they just lose interest when it goes on forever. But it can also be the opposite, which is what you saw with SNC, is the drip, drip, drip gets worse and worse instead of better and better. And I think we're seeing that with We as well.
Yes. Yeah, Trudeau is the only Canadian Prime Minister to be found formally guilty of breaking ethics rules, like the first time in our history.
There's a different issue. You may know I'm on a couple of boards, the Rotary Club, the Board of Trade. Everyone knows if you have a conflict of interest, you say you have a conflict and you don't vote. And exactly. I don't know how the Prime Minister... So I think for Trudeau, it's less obvious because there is an argument that his mother was part of this speaking tour and it was her job and they hired through the speaking agency to bring her in. So there's a slightly different context there. Bill Morneau, though, his daughter worked for the organization. He absolutely should have said, I got a big
thing said Morneau right here. Right?
Yeah. No,
I mean, you do not like Bill Morneau. I mean, your Twitter is replete. You have the 1 of 3, 2 of 3, Morneau. Like, what is... Yeah, there it is. There he is. He's got it up there on the screen there. So
I can't see that.
Oh, you can't see it. So basically, it's your tweet where you did the 3 tweets where, every increase... He's supposed to be the one that's keeping a sharp eye with the financial savvy and with understanding the rules and all that. You really don't like Bill Morneau. Why is it spilling into Bill and not his boss, though?
So firstly, it's your fault that I did all that because you asked me on Twitter what my opinion was. Yeah. And you got me thinking about it, and then I expanded on it. I was trying to avoid the topic or not think about it. Anyway, my problem with Bill Morneau is look at what he's done as finance minister. What can you say other than finally during this crisis getting out programs quickly, whether you think the programs are right or not, at least he was able to make them happen and he had some sort of solution. But other than that, he's the guy who was supposed to be Trudeau's Bay Street connection. He was going to keep the books in order. Instead, we have $20 billion deficits under him before COVID hit. He was the guy that started with the crazy small business tax changes that got an entire segment of the population up in arms and had to completely backtrack on them. Mm-hmm. He is the guy who was responsible at the beginning of COVID. You had all these programs the opposition was going to support. But Trudeau's department said, and Parliament doesn't have to approve spending until December 2021 or something. He should have known that was a horrible thing to be suggesting, even though I suspect it came from the civil service. And he didn't seem to take responsibility for his screw up. It was the first major screw up of the economic crisis. And it cost the Liberals big time. And he hasn't been held accountable for it. I really don't know what he's done that makes people think he's a good minister of finance.
I actually think he's a horrible Minister of Finance, actually. And I think that he does not fall into the Paul Martin tradition of, progressive with fiscal responsibility that the Chrétien Martin era represented for Liberals. I mean, whether you're a Liberal or not, that was a powerful combination, Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien. And they did an, whatever you want in the historical annals of Canada. We'll look back at that time most likely positively or mostly positively. The Morneau-Trudeau tandem is not a good combination for Canada. But you're saying that it's Morneau's fault and Trudeau doesn't have any responsibility with all this?
So I think the Martin Chrétien example is a good one because people assumed that Morneau and Trudeau would be the same.
Exactly.
And it turns out instead that Morneau has the same weaknesses as Trudeau. He got his money from his family. Mm-hmm. He's essentially an elitist. He doesn't see his negatives. And those are all the same problems Trudeau has. So he's highlighting Trudeau's problems and compounding them instead of fighting against them and making it better. So that's the biggest problem with Morneau is supposedly the number 2 man in cabinet. So why don't I hold Trudeau responsible? I do hold Trudeau responsible. And I don't want you to get me wrong about that. But I think that the level that he's gone to is different because what I see, I don't know if you saw the testimony yesterday at all. The opposition was asking, well, what about Margaret Trudeau? Didn't you really just want her because her last name was Trudeau? I think if you go back, you're going to see that she actually got a book published somewhere around the time that Trudeau was elected, if not just after. It was about her mental health struggles as a 25-year-old woman marrying the 50-year-old prime minister. It might have even been worse than that. And, she's had a difficult life. And she's a
That's
celebrity.
hard to claim. But a difficult life?
Imagine a 21-year-old marrying someone in his 50s who's the prime minister and suddenly having all that media attention on them. And it sounds like it wasn't a very, I don't know, if you read about that marriage, ultimately they were divorced within, 10 years when the kids were young. So she has been able to use her name and her celebrity to make a life for herself.
So was her son.
Well, let me finish. So if you think that that's unfair, that she's been able to take advantage of the Trudeau name, fine. You should say Margaret Trudeau shouldn't be a speaker. But the reality is that she is, and people want to hear from her. And we used her to bring out a crowd, and they paid her to go to schmoozers and talk to people she probably didn't really want to talk to, and to make those connections and raise money for charity, just like any other celebrity would have. So does it help that she was the prime minister's mother? Of course it helped. But they weren't doing it because they thought the prime minister was going to give them a favor in return. I think they were doing it because they were trying to take advantage of her celebrity. And
Are you talking about the Kielburgers now?
Yeah. But so I'll go back to Trudeau. I don't think Trudeau had the view of I'm going to help we because they're being nice and giving my mother a job. I don't buy that for a second.
I don't buy it either. Just to jump in here, just before we go any further, I just want to say your summarization on Facebook, the unnecessary and whatever scandal or whatever that you wrote.
Inexplicable.
While I disagree with your conclusions, okay, I felt like that was when you on the balance of truth, right? You're looking, okay, what actually happened? Forget about the political mumbo jumbo and this person and that person and the corruption and, this idea that we have to go all the way to the extreme. Maxime Bernier is calling out Trudeau on, he's a corrupt and this and that. That's fine. I mean, that can happen. But in reality, I actually believed your version of events the most. I don't know if it was 100% correct, but the way you kind of laid it out, I disagree with your conclusions. But to me, you're saying that Justin Trudeau is not corrupt, but incompetent.
I think incompetent is going too far because there are other things that have worked well with this government. I think it would be better to describe him as blind to his own biases. And I think he believes what he sells, that he is this great, wonderful feminist who can't do anything wrong. And anytime he gets proof that that's not true, instead of really considering who he is and what he's done wrong, I think he explains it away, and he finds excuses to explain it away. And he's probably a bit of a narcissist. I don't think it's as bad as. Well, it sounds like you might like Donald Trump, but I don't think it's as bad as Donald Trump.
I don't like or dislike Donald Trump. To me, it's not about a like situation. If you look at it, I like his policies with China pre-COVID. I like some of his stance towards China post-COVID. I like some of the things he's done in terms of things that he does. Like you name a I like the way he threatened to pull the troops out of Germany. I think Germany needs a message like that. Like, hey, don't forget that Russia's right on your border. Okay, and who butters your bread? Like, I think sometimes those messages need to be sent. But he's a ridiculously divisive person. Like, he divides people for sure. He insults them on Twitter. I don't think any of that is necessary, and I think it makes a lot of things worse. So there's my opinion on Trump. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy. So I'm going to tell you a story. I went to China in 2014, had a big tour of lighting factories in China. And while I was there, I bought a bunch of traditional Chinese outfits for my family. Okay. And I went in November or mid-November over American Thanksgiving it was. Okay. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if all my friends knew I went to China and my family all wore these beautiful Chinese dresses I bought for my daughter and this Chinese outfit I bought for me and my son. And we took a Christmas picture in these Chinese outfits. So we did this. And we took the picture and it was like, I looked at it and I thought, now that I see a picture of me dressed up like a Chinese guy and my wife all dressed up in these Chinese garbs with things in their hair, I don't think that's a good idea to send that to our friends at Christmas time. Yeah, they know I went to China. Like, you would have got one of these Christmas cards, right? Like, I would have sent one to you. And, you would have seen, well, hey, Mike's Chinese now or something or whatever. Ha, 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 funny. Maybe not. Maybe not on the Christmas card, right? And so they went in all the costumes went in our costume box in our basement, and our kids played with them. And that was that. You got a guy running around India in traditional Indian garb with his family. Don't you think that's a little bit ridiculous and embarrassing for Canada?
At the time that it happened, so his wife is a yoga instructor, right?
Come on, Jason.
Let me
no,
finish.
Man.
I wonder whether they really believe that what they were doing was appropriate and respectful. I think they didn't do it because they knew it was going to look silly. They did it because they thought it would be respectful. So obviously it wasn't. And you hear these stories about people saying, why was he wearing, formal wedding attire at some event that didn't require the formal wedding attire? So yeah, it was dumb. And I think that what that goes to is part of Trudeau's problem is that he's drama. Everything about him is drama. He was a drama teacher. He also is successful in politics because he understands how to make things interesting for people and how to create drama, and it can work very well for him. But when he doesn't get the right tone, it looks stupid, and that you could say that about anyone that's in the drama world. I'm sure we've all.
Yeah, but he's the Canadian Prime Minister, Jason, and he's running around India. This is not. I mean, I know enough as a light bulb salesman that when I see the picture of my family in the Asian, garb that I bought from a Chinese market from Chinese people that were happy for me to buy it and were there to sell it to me. I understand that. There's a little bit silliness to this, that it's perhaps somewhat maybe racist. There's some cultural appropriation there. We expect more from the Canadian Prime Minister, do we not, Jason?
I never would have dressed like that. I think it was silly. But at the same time, but I've also seen you go to an Indian wedding, and there's white guys dancing with their hands in the air like they're Indian, and everyone thinks it's great. So
they're participating with the people. This guy's showing up in traditional Indian garb while the Indian counterparts are wearing suits.
So I don't know what to say except that I don't really know why they did it. I'm not in the Prime Minister's office.
But that's because he's not that smart, Jason. He's a clown in some ways. Come on, admit it. You've been hinting at it. in your articles on Facebook. You've been hinting at like the guy doesn't know what he's doing.
So I have two minds about it.
Okay.
Because there is that side to him, but there is also the side to him that went from being elected as a former prime minister's son, who everyone said that about. And what did he do? He got in that boxing match that really made people respect his judgment. He was eating seal meat to show that he wasn't some crazy lefty. He did a whole host of things that made people think, wow, this guy is a good politician and he's smarter than we thought he was. And I absolutely had that opinion 2014, 2015, 2016. I've started to lose it now. I've started to wonder if I just got taken in by an image that someone else created for him. But all that stuff happened. And, for him to have gotten to the point of being prime minister, I just don't think you can be stupid to get to that point. I think you can have some weird ideas and you can have some strange eccentricities that make you look dumb. But in the end, I don't think he's an unintelligent person. I think he is making mistakes, and I couldn't tell you why. It's got to have something to do with the way he's grown up and lived his life.
How many times have you dressed in blackface, Jason?
So I had that conversation with my father because I was saying, he was 12, especially when he was younger. He was in high school. Remember in Quebec, they were doing blackface at public events until 5. Even now, I think it still happens, and there's some people that defend it. So he grew up in a different society. My father said to me, yeah, Jason, that you were smart enough. You've never worn blackface before. And you're right. I've never done it. I never would have even occurred to me to do it.
I've seen a blackface show. So back to my trip to China. When I was in China, we met some people at a hotel. Long story short, they said, the best show in Shanghai tonight is the circus show. And I said, where's that? And then we went to this circus show. You walk into this nightclub. It's a giant circus. Okay. And there was a show in the middle of it, which was, this is going to be controversial or whatever, but I was there. The person that brought me there was African-American and seen the show many times, and he had brought me there. And what it was about 8 Chinese midgets, or what's the right word, Scott? Dwarves or little people?
Little people.
Okay. In full blackface, rapping to Biggie Smalls. And I was there. There's a picture of me with them. It's out there. That's my only encounter in my life with blackface. Other than I know who Al Jolson is, and I refuse to say that Al Jolson was a racist simply because he did blackface songs. I refuse to say that. You have to look at people in the climate of their times. And so my only experience with blackface was I went to an Al Jolson convention where blackface was discussed, and I saw a blackface show in China by accident in my life. And I was there, and I found it entertaining, I'll have to say. I laughed. I thought it was funny at the time. There was alcohol and drinking involved. There was a packed nightclub full of Americans and Europeans. And the crowd enjoyed the show, to be honest with you. And it was almost like in a way, because we were in China, it was almost like a commentary on American racism, if you will. It wasn't actually in America and done by Americans. It was done by foreigners. And so there was an element of it where they were making fun of American racism or fun of American social cohesion or something. It was definitely something. It was a parody of America the whole night anyway. So that's my only experience with it. We have the Canadian Prime Minister who's actually dressed up in blackface in his lifetime. And to say that this happens in Quebec, yeah, maybe you go to a sideshow or whatever they call them these days, a carnival, and there's someone at the carnival who's dressed up in blackface, and ooh, you get a little tingle of being bad or whatever. It's French Canadian, and that's what we did in the 70s and 80s or whatever, or 90s or whatever it was when he was a kid. No, he was dressed in blackface, Jason. That's embarrassing.
Yeah, he was giving a performance to his high school, and from what I could tell, the high school loved it. There doesn't seem to be any suggestion that people thought it was wrong. I think back when I was a kid, we'd play cowboys and Indians, and we dressed up as Indians. If no one had ever told me, Jason, you shouldn't do that, I would have assumed it was still fine to do.
Right, so, but he didn't admit it, and he couldn't tell anybody how many times he'd done it. Like he was hiding it.
That's a different issue. That's a different issue. That goes back to the drip, drip, drip thing I was talking about. That why didn't his staff know about this? Imagine if he knew it was out there, and he took responsibility and announced it himself.
Why
and
not?
said, I've learned my lesson. Like, there are so many things he could have done. By the way, I'll tell you a theory that I have, and I have no evidence to back it up. But you look at him as the teacher in BC when he dressed up in brown face, they're calling it, with the turban on.
There is no brown face. There's no brown face. He dressed up like Aladdin. It was a great costume.
So
I think those are different things, by the way.
Yeah, so he dressed up as Aladdin. He ended up leaving that job, apparently, not the weird rumors that are out there, but apparently the reason he left is that he thought the students should be fighting the power and the administration didn't like him supporting the school newspaper. I think Trudeau might have been sort of I hope I'm allowed to say this, you're a shit disturber. I think he was a shit disturber when he was younger. His father was prime minister. He was probably a bit of a troublemaker. I think he knew dressing up as Aladdin that it was controversial, and he probably did it because he wanted to make the point that he could do it and that it was a controversial thing and that it was still acceptable. It would not surprise me in the least if that was what was going through his mind at the time. And we'll never know.
Why does he feel the need to lie to everybody? Why does he feel the need to call up Jagmeet Singh and apologize? Like, that's so ridiculous to call up Jagmeet Singh. Yeah, calling up Jagmeet Singh personally and apologize. I'm sorry that 20 years ago I dressed up like Aladdin. Like, what is that?
Well, I think he did it because Jagmeet Singh, I think, wanted him to. And that's a different part of the story. While it was going on, I thought that Singh initially had a very good response, but as time went on, he was clearly trying to milk it and take advantage of it. And I think the media allowed him to say things that he knew was going further than he needed to go on that particular issue.
I think he turned people off, to be honest with you, because there is no, like, okay, blackface. The history, if you understand Al Jolson and you go back further, blackface was a way of humiliating black people. It was a standard thing that you did. There's cartoons where they over-accentuate the African-American lips and the roundness of the face, and white people would put this around their eyes, and they were clearly blackface. There is no brown face. Blackface is clearly meant to humiliate black people. There's no other explanation for it. And whether people found it funny in the 1920s to the 1970s to the 90s, whatever it was, that's what it was for. There is no brown face. And this idea that he has to apologize for it just speaks to his lack of integrity. I mean, you have to be able to come out and say that. It's not, I dressed up like Aladdin. No. You should have said I won best costume. I wonder if he has a trophy in his closet that's like, I won best costume that night. I have a trophy in my closet. My wife and I dressed up like Tony Montana and Elvira Montana. And we won best costume couple, and I have the trophy. He probably has a trophy.
So I think to the extent, if it had just been that, and if you look at how brown people responded to it, you might be right that he could have gotten away with that. But he must have
I don't even think he could have gotten away with it. He could have just been honest and said,
Michael, he must have known that the blackface stuff was out there. So how could he defend dressing up as Aladdin one day, knowing that the next day this video of him in high school pretending to be, I forget who it was a black entertainer, the banana. Anyway, if he knew those other videos were out there, he had to do his apology before they came out, because otherwise it would have really made him look stupid to defend himself one day and then apologize the next day. So I don't think politically he had a choice. He had to apologize for that.
The sexual assault allegations in BC, with the reporter. I don't know if you remember that scandal.
It's harassment. I don't think it's sexual assault.
Right, harassment. Okay. That comes out. That gets washed away in the. At what point, as a liberal, for like Justin Trudeau, like I look at Jean Chrétien, I look at Paul Martin from my era as a liberal. Even Stéphane Dion. I didn't mind Stéphane Dion. I thought he was weak, but I didn't think he was a person of low character. Does that, you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe they didn't know enough about him or whatever. But in my lifetime, I don't see how you could be a liberal and not be disgusted by Justin Trudeau's behavior up to this point. We haven't even started into the wheat charity yet.
Well, you're talking, other than India, you're talking about behaviors from before he was prime minister, and I think even before he was elected. So the sexual harassment example you gave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what bothers me most about that is that he has punished other people
mm-hmm.
or probably very similar actions.
Or
kicked him
less.
out of caucus.
Or
One of the
less.
first things he did was kick 2 MPs out of caucus because there were allegations against them. So I think that he's a hypocrite in that sense. And when Blackface came out, I was tweeting about it. I thought he was a hypocrite, and I thought that was the worst part of what was going on. Or I might have privately said it to some friends. I think during the election, I didn't want to tweet it out and get myself noticed for it. But so that side of it, that he's two-faced, absolutely. He expects things from other people that he isn't prepared to do himself. And I have a feeling he doesn't even realize that. I think he would have some explanation or excuse as to why that isn't the case. But
I have the explanation. You said it earlier.
But before
you said it earlier. The guy's an egotistical narcissist. Clearly.
So I was not a fan of Trudeau when he first came out. You mentioned Stéphane Dion. I used to write a political blog called Cherniak on Politics. I had about 1,000 readers, unique visitors a month, so a lot more readers a day. And when Trudeau came out and supported Gerard Kennedy, that was his first foray into politics, really. My response was, who the hell is this Justin Trudeau guy? If his father wasn't Pierre Trudeau, nobody would care what he had to say. He's never been involved in the Liberal Party. So at the convention, I ran into Justin Trudeau, and a group of us, I put my hand out, assuming he has no idea who I am. You're Jason Cherniak. He knew what I had written about him, and it was a very embarrassing moment for me. But that was my initial take on him. So when I say that I came to the view by 2014, 2015, that he was the right person to be prime minister, I actually had a long road to get to that because it wasn't where I started. I saw over time he did a number of things that made me respect him. And I think there's even an article by Paul Wells during the Liberal leadership that said if his last name wasn't Trudeau, he'd be the obvious next leader because he was a celebrity. He was making good political moves. He was popular and recognizable in the public. He was actually the obvious person, whether he was a Trudeau or not. So you get to the point where he's leader. Okay, he becomes prime minister. He does what everyone thought was impossible, going from third to first place. Now he has all these problems coming out. And you can complain about the problems and you can say, well, he's not the guy I thought he was. But do you also say, and now we're going to kick you out like you're some scumbag that never had anything useful to contribute? Or do you say, this is the guy that got us here? We have to give him a chance to dig himself out of the hole. And I think it's still fair to say, give him a chance to dig himself out of the hole. In particular, because if you look at the alternatives from the Conservatives, I'm not sure that there is.
You're not going there. I'm not letting you go there. This is about Justin Trudeau.
Okay. No, but it is partly. So if he resigned tomorrow and there was a leadership election, I wouldn't be upset about that. But I'm not about to call for him to resign. And, we are in the middle of an economic crisis. What I think needs to happen, and this is what I wrote on Facebook a couple days ago, is that he needs to allow caucus more oversight. Cabinet has to have more oversight. He needs to appoint more ministers and hire some staff that are not Trudeau people. They have to be more objective and willing to speak truth to power. And if he can do that sort of thing, he basically has to accept that he no longer is the popular guy carrying the Liberal Party. He is now the prime minister who is using the Liberal name to keep himself in power, and he has to let the more traditional Liberal people come back into the fold. He can't just have it as the Trudeau Party anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he basically told everyone to F off who didn't agree with him back in the beginning of his
he kicked all the senators out of cabinet. Yeah. One of the reasons I'm not an MP is because he thought Leona Ellison would be a better MP than me. And look, now she's deputy leader of the Conservative Party. I mean, they made some really silly decisions in their attempts to get rid of people that they saw as troublemakers.
But, you mentioned that a lot of this stuff happened before. How do you explain the whole Aga Khan thing? I mean, that thing's very troubling to me. The vacationing, the obvious influence peddling that goes on. I mean, look, I wine and dine customers all the time. I'm consistently on my lighting show. I hope none of the people listen to this, but I'm about to say I'm consistently thinking about how I can influence people of power that can give me access to things that I want through my lighting show, and that's what's happening. Sorry, is that me? I mean, this guy. I mean, the Aga Khan thing is very concerning to me, where the Canadian Prime Minister is taking his family to a private island to be wined and dined by a registered lobbyist.
Mm-hmm.
Like that happened while he was prime minister, Jason.
Yeah. So I can't say I looked very closely into it. What struck me, I read a lot of history. Mm-hmm. And if you read history, you know that politicians forever have had rich people offer them their vacation homes as a place to relax without the public being able to take up their time and shake hands and that sort of thing. So historically, it's not out of the ordinary.
What's wrong with the cottage in Quebec? He's got a problem with that little cottage?
Well, the only thing I can guess, because apparently the issue isn't that he went, it was that he didn't properly declare it. Wasn't that what he ultimately got in trouble for, is he would have been allowed to do it if he had declared it properly?
Well, he was sanctioned by the ethics watchdog in December 2017.
But it was for not getting permission.
Conflict of interest rules when he accepted a vacation on Aga Khan's private island in 2016.
Yeah. So I think that time you could forgive as a first case if it was a matter of just not technically following the rules. What bothers me is that he doesn't seem to have learned from that. And once he was told what those rules were and what he had to do, he continues, like with this We Charity thing, to do things without following those conflict of interest rules. And that bothers me more, is that he's not learning from his mistakes, or that his staff.
Is that not because he's incompetent, Jason? That's what I'm trying to get at here, is that I don't actually believe the when people say that Justin Trudeau's corrupt and this sort of stuff. Like, I understand why people would see it that way from an outside looking in. But I remember a lawyer, a friend of mine a long time ago, said, never assume malevolence when incompetence will do. I don't know who that was that told me that. But we get into the We Charity here. And you look at the numbers. So I don't think it's $250,000 to his mom, $40,000 to his brother or sister, and then Morneau's kid works there or something like that. You're not talking about big numbers by comparison to the contract size. And you look at $1 billion, almost $1 billion Canadian dollars is given away to the Kielburgers. By the way, I went to high school with Mark Kielburger. I played rugby on the same team with him. So I know him.
Cubs with Craig Kielburger.
I lost a public speaking contest to Craig Kielburger. We were the finalists. He and I were the finalists, and it was at the Royal Canadian Legion on Spring Garden Avenue at Shepherd and Yonge. And he and I were the finalists, and I lost to his speech about nothing. That was his speech. It was about nothing. I remember it was a good speech. It was good. It was entertaining. He was a good public speaker. And I've always liked Mark Kielburger. He's a member of the Order of Brébeuf at my high school. I remember he did a great job starting the school newspaper. I remember him running for president, and he was a good rugby player in it. And quite frankly, I thought he was a nice guy. I didn't think anything negative about him. But he did come out and say that the Prime Minister's office called him and told him they were awarding him this contract. And that's a little awkward, don't you think? Like, I don't think Mark Kielburger's lying about that.
Was it the prime? So I didn't hear all the testimony. I thought what he said is the Minister of Finance called and suggested.
Originally on his podcast or whatever that recording was, he was all excited and he was like, you know how he's like a motivational speaker. He gets all jacked up. He gets excited. And he's like, yeah, you know what? We're ready to go. We're going to get the youth program going. The Prime Minister's office called us yesterday and we're ready to go. And we got the money and we're going to do all these great things. Like, I felt when I watched that, I felt like that's a guy that's just excited that he's got the biggest deal in the history of, well, it's not his business, but whatever you want to call that not-for-profit that Me to We is. I'm not criticizing it. Not-for-profits need to exist and charities need to exist. But whatever you want to call his enterprise, right? He was excited and just being honest about what happened.
Right. So I think what they've said since is that was not quite true and it wasn't the PMO directly that called them. So he might have, I think what he said is that he was exaggerating in that particular comment. But to me, that says a whole lot about the scandal, is that this was a charity that until this scandal, all political parties loved and thought was great. Although apparently in the charitable sector, they have a bad reputation, but that's a different issue. Politically, everyone loved them. And I think the Liberal cabinet said, we've got this program. The We organization's prepared to do it. how could it go wrong? I think that they thought it was a no-brainer, and they all approved it without really thinking it through and doing their due diligence. And that's the worst part of it, is that who did the due diligence? Who in the civil service said, wait a second, who told us that we is capable of doing this program? What is our evidence that it's capable? Who in the cabinet said, wait a second, when does this we organization, when have they ever been involved in volunteerism and this sort of work? When have they ever organized anything involving $500,000 spent over 2 months, or $500 million? Sorry. I think that it was the internal due diligence that got lost. And when you look at the civil servants answering questions to the committee, those civil servants are basically admitting that they didn't do their job as well as the cabinet minister.
Yeah, but listen, I own a company. Okay? And if somebody in my company doesn't do their job, it's not their fault. It's my fault. Okay, the buck stops somewhere, and I don't disagree with. I think that Mark Kielburger. I think it was Mark. For sure, comes out on that podcast. I think he is being 100% honest. And whether their reputation in the charitable sector, I mean, there's people that don't like my company's Lighting Solutions is like this, or Waste Aversion is like that, whatever. There's always gossip like that amongst competitors. The reality is that the contract was worth more than the entire revenue of We Charity for 10 years times 2 or something ridiculous like that. Like they had never dealt with these kind of numbers before. And clearly, it was going to make Mr. Kielburger very wealthy, whether it's a not-for-profit or not. And it was handed to him by his friend, who he hired his mother a couple months or whatever ago, and whatever else. And then Billy Morneau's daughter is working there. I mean, it starts to smell like a rat, a really nasty rat, Jason.
I don't think it's true that he was going to get wealthy, though. What I've seen is that him and his brother, the two brothers, are each paid $125,000 a year as a salary, and otherwise everything goes into the charity. I think the way they benefit.
I want to see the books. I want to see the books. I want to see who owns the charity, what trust, the Mark Kielburger Family Trust owns what, and the Craig Kielburger Family Trust owns what. I mean, you can't say that. The reality is some monster amount of money.
These are charities. The way charities work, you don't have shareholders and dividends. There is someone that owns the charity, but if they sell it, they don't get the money for selling the charity. The charity ultimately, if it folds, the money has to go to a charitable cause of some sort.
I understand how it works, but listen, the United Way CEO probably has a salary of $10 million a year or $5 million a year.
I don't know how much, but the value to them was being able to say, we pulled off a $500 million program. That's what the value to them was. It wasn't that they were going to get personally wealthy. You could also say the value was they were going to have more employees hired, and they might have had a way to do other large projects and keep those employees hired, to the extent that making your organization bigger helps you, even in a charitable situation. Yes, it was going to benefit them, but I don't think it's a personal benefit of money.
I disagree with that 100%. I think for sure they would have paid themselves a monster bonus for pulling it off, because that's what I would have done. And because hey, listen, Mark Kielburger and Craig Kielburger are incredibly smart, intelligent, and competent people. Okay, they would have pulled it off. They would have done it, and they probably would have done a good job doing it. Okay, and they would have paid themselves and whether or not you say money, they're getting the social capital, like you mentioned as well, which is just as valuable as the financial capital would be in terms of the scope, their worldwide presence. Everybody knows them. YTV Achievement Awards pulled off the COVID-19 special heist on the Canadian people and gave everybody their money. They wanted to add it to their revenue. They wanted to add it to their.
Let's say you believe it was a good program and the money would have been well spent. Mm-hmm. Then anyone that successfully pulls it off hasn't heisted anybody. They've done a good job. They've done something for the Canadian people. So this is why I think it's important. As long
as other people have a right to access the bidding process, I got no problems with it.
Also, that's a government problem. If the government,
that's a Justin Trudeau calling his buddy in and warning him the contract problem.
if the government came to you tomorrow and offered you a sole source contract and they say, we've done our research, we think you're best for it, would you say, no, I'm not going to take it unless you do
No,
a
but
public
if it turned out to be a scandal, I would come out right away and say, you know what? JT came to me. He said, here's $1 billion, Michael. Run with it. Make it happen. It's all up to you. Don't worry. The money's coming from the taxpayer. Net 30 days. Send us the invoice and you're good to go.
Isn't that what they've done? Isn't that what they've done? They've said they came to us. We chose to cancel because it looks bad. We've lost $5 million. I think that's what they've done. I don't understand why they're the targets.
I'm not criticizing the Kielburgers at all.
Well, but a lot of people are.
No, I don't think the Kielburgers should be criticized at all. I don't think it has anything to do with them. I think that, I don't think that, honestly, I think your article on Facebook was correct in that it laid it out. I think Justin Trudeau is just totally incompetent, dude. And that's my opinion. I think it's also your opinion.
No, because he's not incompetent about everything. The fact that he gets ethics issues wrong. But you know what?
The fact that he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. The fact that he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, I'm going to put that aside because there's other things that he's good at.
Because what we're talking about is process problems. He doesn't understand how to declare a conflict. He doesn't understand.
He should not be the prime minister of a nation, of a nation state.
Well, this is the world we live in, where people get elected because they're celebrities. I think that's an unfortunate reality of how our political system works right now. So,
Mike Myers should run for the NDP, and Jim Carrey should run for the Conservatives, and then everyone can have a field day, and we'll just have celebrities in charge of us.
Well, no, I don't think that's the way it should work, but it's the way it's turned out. You have Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump, for all the differences in politics, got elected for the same reason. They were both celebrities.
Yeah, there's only one difference between the two of them. You know what it is? One is a covert egotistical narcissist, and the other one is an overt egotistical narcissist. And that is the only difference.
I would also say one of them is in politics to make money and the other is not.
Which one?
I think, Donald Trump, if you don't think that he's looking to get his hotels approved in Russia and Turkey when he's done as president, I mean, it's all about money for him. Everything for him is business.
I think you're wrong about that. I think it's actually the other way around. I think the other guy that's on his way to the poverty train before he got elected to prime minister was probably the Trudeau family. Was probably pretty hard up. I don't know what their financial situation is, but they got a significant lifestyle to maintain. And I think they needed JT to become the prime minister in order to continue to maintain it, which is why he's getting his mom and his brother and his friends and his buddy Bill Morneau's daughter hired and all this other stuff because they're broke. If they had the money, they wouldn't do it.
That's true.
Well,
no, the Trudeaus have money from the Prohibition era. I think it's a wealthy family.
So they're like the Kennedys. They're booze hounds.
Remember that before Trudeau got elected, he was getting paid $25,000 per speech. He only had to do 4 speeches a year to earn a good income.
Can we see his tax returns then? I'd love to see his tax returns. Put them out there, JT.
It's interesting. I don't know if they do that in Canada.
Yeah, like that would be interesting because actually, to me, Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump are very similar. There is no.
Actually, I think that. I think if you were to look on the Ethics Commissioner's website, you would see there's a disclosure of total wealth and assets. I don't know that you'd see tax returns though. So
what's he worth? You got a guess?
I don't know. I've never looked into it.
I wonder if it'd be like a couple $1 million or whatever what he's worth. To see what his net worth is.
Probably at least.
That's not that much. I mean, it seems like a lot to the average Canadian, but you think about it, there's people worth hundreds of millions of dollars and.
Well, it depends how you invest it.
Yeah. Jason Cherniak. Jason Cherniak, always a pleasure, man. Thank you for chatting. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we shut her down?
You didn't let me say it, but I will. For all of Trudeau's problems, if the Conservatives don't put up a better alternative, then he's still going to deserve to be elected just because there isn't a better alternative out there.
That's very sad. Folks, this has been the Get a Grip on Life podcast. We're ending on a sad note. But if you've made it all the way from here, I know Jason Cherniak, known him a long time. He's a good guy. And I know he appreciates it as much as I do that you made it all the way to the end with us. Jason, what's your, are you still practicing legally? Are you still,
Yeah, of course.
Because I lost my
Yeah,
lawyer for 6 months there when you were running for office.
you didn't lose your lawyer. I was just less available than usual. Yeah,
Give
I'm
your
running a
website.
law practice.
Yeah, give your,
Cherniak, so it's Cherniak Law, CHERNIAKLAW.com, based in Richmond Hill at Yonge and Elgin Mills. I do real estate, wills and estates, litigation on contract and real estate issues, and corporate work as well.
So be careful with Jason Cherniak if you hire him, because he's a man of integrity. So I'm serious with you. There's not a lot of lawyers like that. He's a good guy. He's my lawyer. I've used him on many transactions and also for litigation. He wrote my will and some other things like that. So you go to cherniaklaw.com for a great lawyer in Richmond Hill. And of course, if you've made it this far, hey, you probably thought about starting a podcast, didn't you? You want to start a podcast. I know you do. Come on, man. You know you do. You just got to go to getagripstudios.com. Get Scotty doing it for you. He'll do all the work. He'll do everything for you. Go to getagripstudios.com.